Hey, welcome back to the Unshakable Founder. My name's Josh, and today I'm going to start things off a little bit differently. I was reflecting on this series of videos that I'm doing every single week to kind of document my progress, and I've got my phone here. Let me set some of this down. I've been relying on the productivity app called Tana to kind of document more of my journey and more of the information that I've been gathering over the past probably 3 weeks now. But there are some things on there that I want to talk about that kind of address something that came up this week it actually came up today after listening to Diary of a CEO. Steve Bartlett was talking to Alex Hormozy, Cody Sanchez, and Daniel Priestley, who he called the Avengers of entrepreneurs online right now. And they are a powerhouse of experienced, highly successful entrepreneurs. And it just made me think about the value that I provide on this channel just by documenting what I'm going through. And initially it made me feel, the topics I covered here are kind of low value compared to what those guys can offer. But then thinking a little bit more deeply on it, I realized that people that are in my position, people that are in kind of like the middle of trying to figure all of this out before reaching success, is highly undervalued and underrated because not many people document this part. And not many people acknowledge that, you could fail and continue to fail hundreds of times before that one success that leads to the recognition, the financial abundance, everything that the impact that I'm looking to make, and what I'm trying to do here, my mission, having it be recognized by thousands, if not millions of people. It's going to take time for me to get there. And for me, I'll want to look back on this too. So it's not just for, trying to provide value for all of you out there, but sort of documenting what I'm going through. And there are some notes that I made here that I'll talk about. But before I get into that, I just want to cover really quickly the topics that I'll be talking about today. So the intro here will be on some things that I reflected on based on listening to the entrepreneur Avengers, you could say. I will talk about an interview update that I had at the beginning of this week on Monday. I talked about this last week. I had an interview with the CEO of an architecture firm. So I'll give you the update on that. I will talk about a personal update, which was the ultrasound that my wife and I went to on Monday after I had the interview. And that was a really important session for us. And I'll talk a little bit about why. Then I'll talk about a concept I heard about Steve Jobs from Steve Bartlett. And I kind of like this idea. I'll talk about how my life changed when I realized something. And this part will be really important to share for those of you out there who feel like, you're just not the type of person to have your dreams come true or to build a business or to take the risk. When I came to this realization, it changed everything for me. And so I hope it does the same for all of you out there. And then the last thing I'll touch on is quantity over quality. And I'll explain why I believe in that, especially in the early stages of either starting a personal brand or just trying to get your ideas out there. And so that's it from my notebook. But let's dive into this intro. So the things that I want to touch on here are, I talked about how I initially felt like a lot of what I'm talking about here is kind of low level value compared to, what the Alex Hormozys of the world, Steve Bartlett's, Cody Sanchez, and Daniel Priestley, like the ideas that they share and that they can provide to you are, priceless, you could say. But one of the things that I can't discount in terms of its impact is that, for me being in these early stages, if I do get to the point, no, not if, when I do get to the point of success and recognition for my work and what I'm doing, the things that I'm passionate about, mindset, understanding why we hold ourselves back, changing people's perspective on this, gap in believing that their dreams are possible. If I can affect the lives of people and inspire people to change and believe that they are capable of chasing their own dreams and making their own dreams come true, whether that's through business or, pursuing a hobby of theirs or whatever else, that is also priceless, right? So that was a realization that I came to. I wrote down a list here of advantages that my channel provides that you might not find elsewhere. And there are people that are documenting their journeys too. It kind of comes back to this idea of prerequisites that I introduced I think it was last week, either last week or the week before. But one of the things is you get to see the real-time progress of what I would consider like a very normal human being. And this comes down to the fact that a lot of the successful entrepreneurs that you see now who have personal brands, who, have these huge followings, a lot of them started in their teens and early 20s. And the people that, come to mind are like your Alex Hormozis, Russell Brunson, Daniel Priestley, Steve Bartlett, those people, Cody Sanchez, they all started so young. And what happens when you get bit by the entrepreneurial bug when you're already, a little older? So me, I'm in my mid 30s. I'm 37 and I'm coming into my late 30s. I don't know if you consider 37 mid or late 30s, but but I've got a family. I'm about to have, and this is gonna spoil the interview thing, but I'm about to have a full-time job again. And how do you make a business succeed when you've got to balance a full-time job? We're about to be a family of 4 by the end of this year. And this deep desire to, serve people and be there for people who are in their kind of initial stages in business. And like the idea of kind of starting here is insane when you think about it, right? Like there's just so much to learn and so much to absorb about business, marketing, sales. And, for me, it's been absolutely amazing, the amount of growth and progress that I've seen in my own business. I currently have a one-on-one client, which is it's kind of insane to me, considering like I just started this less than a year ago. And that might not sound impressive, but I'm also balancing, spending time with family, financial responsibilities. There are all these things in play that you just don't have when you're a single person with, no kids, no type of responsibility, no relationship responsibilities, no children to worry about. Like you don't have a pet is even like an additional responsibility that you have to think about. And it's just, if you get to see me succeed, someone who is starting from the bottom, like I didn't have any kind of following, then hopefully, you get inspired to chase your dreams and understand that you can make something come true as long as you stick with it long enough to see it come true. And later on, when I share the thing that changed my life, when I understood it, it will play into this whole thing. Like it'll plug right in, and you'll understand how you can also make things achievable for yourself. One of the things that I wrote here that you never get told when you're starting entrepreneurship later in life is having to deal with these feelings of how do I articulate this? When you're in your mid-teens, not mid-teens, when you're in your late teens, early 20s, you're kind of expected to, like, no one really expects a whole lot from you, right? Like they don't expect you to be able to deliver these amazing results. Like they are more open to understanding that you're just starting out. But when you're in your mid 30s, mid 40s, or even mid 50s, 60s, wanting to start a business, you play with these feelings of, do people really understand that I'm also like just starting out? Like, it's almost expected that you should have this amount of experience, having, lived life, and you do, right? You do have lived experience, but you might not have like marketing experience or sales experience. And grappling with that when you're just starting out is a tough pill to swallow. And no one tells you, the criticism that you're going to get from people in your life, the like the judgments, right? Like I've heard from other friends, like, oh, this person is saying this about you chasing your dreams, or about you starting a business. Like, you're being irresponsible with your life. Like you're throwing away 14, 15 years of a career. Like, how could you do that? Like, are you insane? Like, what's wrong with you? Right. But, and then there's all this like projection of their own inadequacies and their own, their lack of ability to be able to chase their own dreams, right? They're driven by their fears more than they're driven by their desire to succeed or to change their life. And that's also a tough thing to kind of deal with when you're starting later in life. And so I kind of wanted to just address that a bit here. Now, I want to talk about the interview that I had, and I'm going back a couple days on my notes here. This is really cool. I like being able to document kind of like my days on this app. But I talked about Tana a little bit last week, but I'm enjoying it so far, and likely to be sticking with it. But I want to talk about my interview. So I had an interview on Monday, and it went really well, I think. Right? Like it's a tentative yes to the position that I applied for at this firm. And I say tentative because they still have to send me the offer letter, which they said they'll get to me by the end of this week. So there's still a day left. I'm looking to follow up tomorrow if I don't see it. But they already said, we're ready to bring you on board. When can you start? And so I gave them a date of August 25th. And so that's about 2 weeks. I have about 2 weeks from now, a little over 2 weeks. So, once I start, I'll be working full time, and I will need to prioritize the things I need to get done each and every week to, make this business succeed. And it's going to be difficult, right? Like I'll need to kind of reorient myself to this full-time position while also balancing, family, home life, the chores I need to get done. And, it's making me consider, because I'll have an income coming in, it's making me consider, the idea of maybe hiring someone to help us out with, whether it's doing laundry, cleaning the house, washing dishes, things like that. just to free up more of my time to spend some of that, the time that I have outside of work, outside of my full-time position, to spend with family, and then to dedicate to the business. So that's something that I'll have to talk to my wife about. But that's something that I'm considering, outsourcing things, because I need to be able to, I still want to be able to see growth in my business. And the things that I'm learning, over the past few weeks, being in this boot camp with Russell Brunson on positioning my offer and, refining my pitch to people, I'm learning a lot. And, the more I learn in terms of how I improve anything in my business, it's going to give me like one step closer to seeing that success that I'm looking to, the impact I'm looking to have. And like, I already know, just based on the feedback that I'm getting from this client that's in my program, that it has the power to transform people's mindsets, and it has the power to transform their life by, having them go through this. And she's already seeing insane value from all the things I'm having her go through and the questions that I'm asking her. And it's been incredible to see someone so eager to improve themselves and to dive in and explore themselves on a deeper level than they've been able to do on their own. And that's what I'm here for. That's that's what breathes life into my mission of, inspiring positive change in people's lives. So got off topic. So the interview overall went well. I won't cover the details of what happened, but the CEO did ask me some tough questions, because I did touch on the fact that I kind of dipped my toes into the entrepreneurial world, and as much as she appreciates that and kind of sees, that I'm intrinsically motivated, she has to question, whether I'm committed to focusing on architecture, because she understands that when you split your focus, you can't excel in each area if your focus is split. And I absolutely believe that too. But I'm in my shoes, I'm willing to split that focus in order to see, long-term progress. You can make much more progress when you focus on just one thing. But now I'm considering, this idea, because ever since I was young, and I don't think I've ever shared this before, but ever since I was young, I've had this dream of becoming an architect and being able to design my own home for my family. And how amazing would it be if I chose to continue this path forward with the architecture, but also with the mindset coaching, get licensed as an architect, design my own home, and have the entrepreneurial side, my business, fund that dream. Have that, to be able to fund that dream and have it come to life would be an incredible story, right? Like, wouldn't you guys, like, not pay to see that, but like, wouldn't you guys join this journey just to see me become a licensed architect, design my own home, make hundreds of thousands, if not millions, from the side business, which, at this point, could very well become the main business. But seeing that dream come to life, and then finding a plot of land, seeing the house come to life, documenting the whole process, that, I don't know, that to me sounds incredible. But it would require an incredible amount of focus on the architecture side, because testing for, the architect's license is incredibly intense. But also having to balance, my family life, because I absolutely value my family. I do not want to get into a position where I neglect their needs, my wife's needs, my children's needs. I love my wife. I love my son. And I do not want to become that person who chooses, the entrepreneurial success, because at the end of our lives, all of us look back on the memories from the relationships, right? Like if you've ever looked at the longest study ever done on happiness, you'll find that it's the relationships and the memories that you make with the people close to you that you fall back on. You never fall back on, man, I wish I would have worked more on my business back then. Like, that's never a thing. It's always, man, I wish I would have spent more time with my son, or I wish I would have spent more time with my wife. And I recognize that. And so it's tough having to balance all of these interests and responsibilities and the things that I value. So, yeah, you'll see over time like how I kind of handle all of that. But yeah, that's enough for the interview. I also wanted to talk about ultrasound. So I don't know if I've ever touched on this before, but I think I've touched on it a little bit. But my wife and I, we had some trouble conceiving our first son. And it was an intense journey. It was like a 2.5 year journey to getting our son. And there was heartbreak in it, and there was a lot of challenges and just a lot of adversity that we had to overcome. We're so grateful for our son. And at the start of this new journey with this new pregnancy, there were some kind of scary things that were happening. My wife was at a fertility clinic, and they were catching some things that were a little concerning, but, something that they kept an eye on, and it resolved on its own. But having that experience of, that 2.5 year long journey to have our first son, we're cautious, right? We hold ourselves back from fully enjoying this experience because we know the possibilities of what could go wrong. And so we had this ultrasound on Monday, and we were hoping for the best. And, that's exactly what happened. The best possible news that we could get is what we got. This is the ultrasound where they actually, they look at the neck, the spine, the heart, making sure it has 4 chambers, the brain. They look at all different parts of the baby's body just to make sure everything's progressing at a pace that's healthy and, in line with kind of like a textbook pregnancy. And so, yeah, everything went well. Everything went great. Everything looks great. So my wife and I kind of breathed a sigh of relief when they told us, like, everything is looking great. Just keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, so that was the ultrasound that we had on Monday. So that covers the kind of like the personal updates. Let me take a look really quickly at what was the other thing. So this will be short. So Steve Jobs. I was listening to, I found Steve Bartlett's kind of like behind the scenes YouTube channel, and I didn't know he had this, but I was reading some of the comments from some of the videos, and people were saying, like, I prefer this over the interviews. And so I started watching some of the videos, and in one of the videos he talked about Steve Jobs had this idea of like the signal to noise ratio. And what that is this signal are all of the things that progress your business forward or your objectives forward, whatever your objectives might be. The things that progress those things forward, those are all part of the primary signal that you need to like kind of focus in on. And then the noise, all of that is the stuff that prevents you from making that forward progress. And so for Steve Jobs, the signal to noise ratio was 80% signal of, 80% focus on the things that move the business forward, and 20% noise. Those are like the distractions, things that like self-care, all those things could fall into noise, things that don't necessarily move your objectives forward. And I just thought it was an interesting concept, because if I take the time each and every morning to identify what the signal is and what the noise is, then I can, kind of consciously choose to focus on the things that are the signal and not the noise. Because there are times during my day where I do get distracted, and that often happens when, say, I need to post something on Instagram, and then I just start scrolling, and I can get caught in a loop. And I've gotten so much better at identifying very quickly, like, oh, I'm in a loop of like scrolling, so I need to stop myself. And I can usually stop myself within 5 minutes now. Sometimes it would be like an hour to like 30 minutes of me getting distracted, but that's, with practice, that has come down to like 5 minutes max, and I'm like, oh, I need to focus on what I'm doing. So like that whole concept was interesting to me, and I thought I'd share that with you guys. I want to talk about something that I realized that changed my life when I realized it. And this is going to be important for anyone just starting out in entrepreneurship, and really, like, it has a ripple effect in any part of your life, whether that's relationships or your health. This is going to kind of change the way you view things, hopefully. So let me go to that entry here. So I'm gonna read this from my notes, because I wrote it better in my notes than I think I could articulate it just freely. And so what I said was, my life changed when I realized this: the reasons that I'm stuck have everything to do with the stories that I'm telling myself and the choices that I'm making that reinforce those stories. Because those stories have the capacity to keep us stuck or propel us forward. I personally make positive changes and forward progress in my life when I consciously change the story that I'm telling myself into an empowering one, and begin making choices that align with that new story. And so this is actually something that I walk my clients through. This is a very important part of the process, because I still see this all the time on online, on like people's social media profiles, this talk about affirmations, right? And saying positive things to yourself and how that can change your life. And I don't necessarily believe that's true when you still make the choices that reinforce things that are not that affirmation. You have to tell yourself positive things, but also perform the behaviors and the actions that align with that new story or that new affirmation, whatever that might be. And that's a very important part of my process, is to kind of reframe the story you've been telling yourself. First is to understand and acknowledge that you're telling yourself a story that is inherently limiting. And then you have to realize kind of consciously that you need to make the effort to change that story. And then you need to identify the behaviors, the choices. You need to make the choices that reinforce that new positive story, that new empowering story. And the longer that you stick with it, the longer that will become your new, how did I say it? The longer you stick with it, the better chance you have of that becoming your new belief. Yeah, I wrote here that the longer I consistently stick with the new narrative and the new choices, the quicker I see the positive results from those choices. So hopefully you guys get something out of that. I know it's kind of hard to believe when you've been telling yourself a certain story for most of your life. And that's the majority of people, right? We've been telling ourselves stories that inherently limit us and our potential because of the evidence that we have stacked against us. And all that is the choices that you've been making that reinforce that story. But when you change that, the light just turned off. When you change that and align new choices with that new story, the longer you stick with it, the better chance you have of that story taking hold, and you build evidence to support that story. So just give it time, okay? The last thing here is quantity over quality. especially in the in the beginning. Excuse me. So let me get to that entry. So this is what I wrote in my entry. So here's why it's so important to post a lot in the beginning, despite what experts might tell you. And this is referring to the quantity over quality. You don't really know what quality is yet, right? You might know what quality is for other people, right? You can study what other people are doing. And generally, right, the frameworks that people use to find success, they work. But even if you copied someone word for word, shot for shot, it's not going to necessarily have the same impact that they can have, because you're fundamentally a different person and you're fundamentally going to have a different process, a different cadence for the way that you say things, a different rhythm in your word choice. You know, things like that have a huge effect on people's ability to kind of resonate with you. And so I ultimately believe that you need to output higher quantities than you do less and higher quality, because you just don't know what that is for you yet. And this belief has been reinforced by, you know, multiple successful entrepreneurs kind of reinforcing that same narrative of, you know, quantity over quality. And a couple of examples that I'll give you are Alex Hormozy, and sorry for the for the noise outside if you guys can hear that. Alex Hormozy often talks about, you know, volume of output. And the most recent example that I remember hearing is, you know, let's say there's an offer you want to put out there, and people will generally scrap the offer if 20 people are reject the offer. And 20 people is not a good metric to measure the success of an offer that you have. You know, put that offer out to like 2,000, 3,000 people, and then you'll understand, okay, maybe this isn't what people want. But the output needs to be massive compared to what people initially think is a good metric to go by. And I hope that makes sense. The other example that I have is Joseph Czar, who I was introduced to by my client actually, and I listened to a presentation that he did earlier this week, and it was like a free masterclass on YouTube on communication and how to be a powerful speaker. I'm going to run through one of the exercises that he gives in that free masterclass, and I'll actually link it in the description below. But he also talks about imperfect output in the pursuit of better understanding. And, you know, obviously because he's a communications expert, he's referring to speaking ability. But I believe that applies to... That's really loud. I don't know if you guys can hear that. The trash truck is here. Yeah, Joseph Czar was referring to speaking ability, but I think that applies to so many different areas in life, whether that's content creation or, you know, putting in different offers out into the world. The imperfect output in the pursuit of understanding. And you know, I generally believe that a lot of imperfect output is required to gain that better understanding. And so until you've kind of, you know, put in the reps and understood what resonates with your audience, then you can start to shift into quality over the quantity. That's it for this week, you guys. I hope you got some value out of this. If you did, please, you know, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment, a like. It will help me out a ton in, you know, getting the reach out there and just helping drive the mission forward of, you know, getting people getting to inspire people and impact people's lives and get them to understand that if they just stick long enough with the behaviors that make their dreams more likely to come true, that they can make them come true. whether that's through business, pursuing a hobby, whatever it is. You guys are more capable than you realize. The future belongs to the unshakable. I'll see you guys next week.